if you said, Tom, I need you to destroy somebody's life, and I'm only going to give you one tool to do it, and you can mess up their sleep, you can mess up their diet, you can have a personal tragedy befall them, but you really have to like do damage. I'm going to take the diet every time. And or anybody you can just destroy anybody by making them intake the wrong foods, and they will stop being able to sleep. So I didn't need to mess up sleep directly. I can mess it up through their food. They're going to be wildly inflamed brain fog. They're going to have
mood swings.
Balance. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be crazy.
So let's start at the beginning. Why did you start thinking about stuff like health, wellness, well-being, all of this? Tell me the story.
Yeah. So in the very beginning, I grew up in a morbidly obese family. And so I joke, sort of, gallows humor, that my family were early adopters of the obesity trend. So my family was morbidly obese before it was like a thing. And so I remember being aware as a kid growing up, my family is fat. Like that was like a thing. I was like, whoa, like it's very noticeable. And now it's so fascinating to look at photos of them back then, because they were so much leaner than they are now. And then just the whole epidemic is just ramped up so heavily. So anyway, that was on my mind. And so I had really kept that at bay until my mid-20s. And I was eating less than I'd ever eaten. And I was hungry and I was putting on fat. And so I was like, what is happening? And so I thought, well, you get older, your metabolism slows down, just the classic thinking. But thankfully, I was in my mid-20s, in the early 2000s. And so the internet is starting, people are starting to get a bit more information. It was easier to talk to people and get some ideas about what was going on. And I get control of my own health. And if I'm completely honest, I did not get control of my health. I wanted to look good naked. And so that was a driving force. And I wanted to impress my wife. And so I was very keen to get strong and to look good naked. And those were my two driving factors. And I actually figured it out. And so then I was like, whoa, wait a second. This is a very solvable problem. And so once I realized it was
Hold on, stop. You just said, well, then I figured it out. Most people don't figure it out, right? They go to straight calorie restriction. It's a miserable life. They're always hungry. What did you figure out at this point?
Okay, so I'm just going to cut through all the bullshit. I'm going to save everybody a gazillion years of time. And there are going to be debates around the edges of what I say. But I'm telling you right now, if people do what I'm about to articulate, they will be 98% of the way to where they want to be. It is so absurdly simple to get that, the Pareto principle, to get the bulk of what you need to do done. And it goes like this. You are going to eat whole food. So if you don't recognize it from how it was walking around or being grown, you've got a problem. So start with that. You're going to cut out the highly processed stuff. You're going to eat whole food, and you're going to minimize anything that spikes your glucose. Now, you can be hardcore like me and actually wear a continuous glucose monitor to find things, because there are things like baby carrots that you wouldn't think are going to spike your glucose, but they do. And it is very individualistic. But anyway, the advice I have for everybody: eat whole food whenever possible, avoid processed foods, and minimize anything that spikes your blood glucose. And that means cut out sugar. That's like the big one, which is already, if you're not eating processed food, you're not going to find things that are as high in sugar. But there are things like fruit. When people conflate fruit and vegetables, I'm always like, what? So berries you could maybe conflate with vegetables, but you can't just blanket fruit. That's crazy town. So whole food, minimize things that spike your blood sugar. If you do that, you are 98% of the way to where you want to be in terms of health, in terms of performance, in terms of aesthetics, all of it. Like, that's the big one. Then, of course, that's a diet. There are other lifestyle factors that we can
get into. We'll come into all of that, but I just wanted to establish that. And I followed the ketogenic diet for a long time. I've actually come off it a bit and allowed myself beans and some other stuff. I haven't worn a glucose monitor, but we'll come into that. So you make this change when you're young, as you said. then what? What's your journey at this point?
Well, so unfortunately, everything that I'm telling you now, I'm telling you with a massive amount of the things I was doing in my 20s were moronic. And so I do all of this experimentation and failure and all that. And finally, now, after interviewing hundreds of people, building a nutrition company, being totally immersed in that world, transforming my own body, saving my wife's life, not kidding, not exaggerating in the slightest, by learning even more advanced stuff about health. So I was like, okay, I've now got the real life experience where I've seen this play out. N of ones, I'm well aware of that. But this is one where, while we may discover over time that there are different mechanisms of action than we think, and we may discover, hey, some of those things that make you feel amazing in your youth may actually not extend your life in the way that you want. So for sure, in that remaining 2%, like, we can really eke things out and push things forward, and we can even go into that stuff. But getting the bulk of it is huge. But I did that through a lot of trial and error. So in my 20s, I was doing what you were saying. I was starving myself. I was hungry all the time. My life was miserable. I was shredded, though. 6-pack abs. Raoul, this is like, if anybody needs motivation to get in shape, if they're anything wired like me, this is my favorite story. So I'm at a pool party with my wife. I've just done 2 of the most miserable years of my life, to where my business partners and my wife pulled me aside and they said, you no longer have a personality, because my calories were so restricted, and I was doing what I'll call rabbit starvation. So I was eating basically no carbohydrates, basically no fat, and just getting everything from protein. Stupid, nobody should do it, but it will get you lean with just obscene amounts of inflammation. But I was lean as hell. And so anyway, at a pool party with my wife, woman swims across the pool, gets out, comes up, looks at my wife and says, can I pet your husband's abs? And I was like, sure. And so she's like, wow. And I was like, every bit of suffering was worth it. Now, I do not need people to agree with that, because health is way more important. And the good news is that you actually can do both, but I didn't know that at the time. So through my 20s and early 30s, I was just making every conceivable mistake that you can make, but starting to learn, like, okay, so that's how I get lean, but it's not reducing my inflammation. What is inflammation? How is it caused?
That's a question I think people need to hear, because people think inflammation, I've banged my elbow and it's inflamed, but that's not what we're talking about. Well, it is, but it isn't.
So exactly. It's the same mechanism, but now, and I will just round this to, this isn't the totality of it. Again, I'm going to talk Pareto principle. Anything you want to go deep in, we can dive past just that. But Pareto principle around inflammation, it is the reason I say eat whole foods, avoid sugar, is because those are the things that are going to inflame you. Both all the processing agents and things that go into the foods, and the way the processing can change the molecular structure. So trans fat is the easiest one to explain. So much of your cell membranes are made out of fat. It's part of what makes them flexible. The fat molecule itself has a bend in it, which makes it quite flexible. When you fry fat, it becomes rigid. But you literally are what you eat. So if the only fat that you're intaking into your body is fried fat, then your cells are actually going to be made from this rigid stuff. That's part of what's going to be creating the inflammation. The other part is, it is a wildly complicated thing that I'm going to grossly oversimplify so that people can intake it, because all I need people to do is actually the behaviors, right? So first of all, not all of these mechanisms of action are yet fully understood, even by the brightest of minds. I am not the brightest of minds, so it's like I have to really round this down. But to keep it simple, as you're intaking these highly processed foods, as you're intaking foods that have glyphosate and things like that on them, you're breaking down what's called the epithelial lining of your gut. Now, the reason that becomes problematic is it's going to let partially digested chunks of basically proteins make their way into your bloodstream. The really bad part of this is that some of those chunks of protein actually look like other parts of your body. And I don't remember, I think it's the hypothalamus, but don't hold me to that. But the gluten protein, the reason that so many people are developing gluten sensitivities is, as we've genetically modified this, you're getting gluten molecules that look different than they used to, and it's biomimicry of, I think, the hypothalamus, but definitely a part of your brain. And because if you have leaky gut, where that epithelial lining is broken, you almost certainly also have leaky brain for the exact same reason. The exact same foods are causing the exact same problem. So they cross the barrier into your bloodstream. Your body mounts an immune response. To do that, it looks at the shape of the protein and says, create an antibody for this. Would be fine if it didn't biomimic a piece of your brain that your body now goes, oh, here's that invader again. And this is how you get brain fog, and if you're really sensitive to this. And so, yeah, as somebody who has had brain fog and was like, what the hell could this be from? Because in my case, it wasn't from wheat, it was from pecans. Who would have thought? So even doing that 80% thing that I'm talking about is not bulletproof, because you might have an N of 1 response to something. So for whatever reason, my sister and I are hypersensitive to pecans. So I discovered that the hard way. But brain fog is real. That's what's happening. You're breaking the blood-brain barrier in your brain, and now things are getting into your bloodstream inside of your brain that you don't want, and you're getting those negative responses. You're getting that immune response. So as the immune system overreacts and is doing what it's supposed to be doing, it's now creating this high level of inflammation in your body, and that high level of inflammation has really deleterious effects if it is prolonged. Most people don't realize that it's based on something they're eating. And so now they're getting themselves into a world of hurt because they just keep eating that food, keep pumping those particles into their bloodstream. The immune system's going crazy. And there is a very, I would say, well-researched theory. So this isn't proof, but it's certainly a working model that most chronic diseases are a result of prolonged inflammation. And now I'm just guessing, but I think this is a very educated guess. I will say that most of that chronic inflammation is due to what you eat. It won't be 100%, but it's going to be close.
We hope you enjoyed the video. At Real Vision, we help you understand the complex world of finance, business, and the global economy with in-depth analysis from real experts. Join the revolution at realvision.com.